अमेरिका यही चाहता है कि वो जो है वो सब मतलब पूरी दुनिया को अपने कंट्रोल में करे।
ठीक है, चाइना इस वक्त ओल्ड एज उसकी बूढ़ा हो रहा है, वो उसकी इकोनॉमी बूढ़ी हो रही है।
उसके बाद चाइना जो है उसने ही अमेरिका को हम कहें कि आंखें दिखाना।
Democracy was born in India. We had our own form of democracy, which would have elected kings or queens, and they could be deposed if they did not perform. Right? So we don't need to be lectured about democracy. We don't need anyone to teach us what democracy is. The truth is that Indians are all one. Muslims are our brothers and sisters. Christians are our brothers and sisters. I believe that even the Pakistanis and the Afghans and the Bangladeshis, etc., Sri Lankans, they are all the same people as us. We have been divided artificially. The West is great at divide and rule, and they seek to continue doing that.
I'm not going to make this intro too long because all of you know what Abhijit Chawda brings to TRS. This one's a geopolitical special from an India perspective, spoke about the Modi government for the first time, spoke about the geopolitical aspect of India in 2022. Globally speaking, we're heading into some very intense times and audiences have gotten to know the basics of geopolitics. What about some deeper layers? That's what was discussed today. AC returns on TRS. Make sure you follow TRS on Spotify. We're a Spotify exclusive, which means that every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. This is one more epic geopolitical special and it's coming straight at you. Enjoy.
I hope मेरी आवाज में ऊंची गई होता है ना।
All right, another super pacey, super intense TRS episode with the ultimate TRS All-Star, Abhijit Chawda. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be back on the show.
Sir, we've done lots of geopolitical specials. We're doing another run of geopolitical recordings today, beginning with India. We've never really broken down the Modi government, India's role in the geopolitical sphere of the world. That's what we'll do today. And this one's meant for Indian citizens, but it's also meant for citizens of other countries, which I strongly believe have a skewed perspective of India because of media narratives given to them. So we'll be taking into consideration all these false social media narratives, everything from the prosecution of minorities to the criticism of the current government to the good things that the current government is doing on an international level. I'm super excited about this episode. I'm fumbling. Are you excited, sir?
Very much.
Nice. We were just having a conversation outside about how you said you've gotten way busier in the last 6 months to a year. And that's because of the kind of reach that YouTube kind of provides to anyone who's providing content to YouTube. You also said that you're not getting enough time to read as much as you'd like. But knowing you, I feel like geopolitics is your subject. So that's something you're constantly in touch with.
Yes.
So right to say this?
It is, yes.
Okay. What's exciting you or scaring you about the geopolitical scenario in the world right now?
What's really interesting is that the world is changing very rapidly. Typically, you see change at the geopolitical scale decade upon decade. In the 2020s, we are witnessing change year upon year. That's how rapidly the world is changing. There is a multipolar world kind of right now. There is this tussle between the US and China. Certain nations seek a multipolar world. The US seeks a bipolar world. China seeks eventually a unipolar world. So that there are three different worldviews that various nations have. And it's a tussle between these three worldviews. Unipolarity, bipolarity, and multipolarity. So who's going to come out on top, we'll know within a couple of decades at most. So that's what's interesting right now. Really interesting.
I feel it's been a few months since we did our last recording from a geopolitics perspective. Do you still feel we're on course for some sort of an international scale world war?
I hope not, but it is a significant possibility for sure. Okay. Because there are multiple friction points worldwide. We just saw what happened in Taiwan. We already know what's happening in Ukraine. There's a slow war happening, the classic slow war strategy that Russia is employing. There is tension between India and the US right now, significant friction, tensions and a tussle that's going on. There is obviously the India-China border dispute. The Chinese are constantly prodding and poking India, and India is not giving in. So there's plenty of all these issues. There's also the China-Japan issue. The Chinese are continuing their so-called peaceful rise, which is not very peaceful. It's the rise of a bully. And then there's the old guard, the US, the Western world, the Western bloc, which is now in visible decline because there's a whole host of problems there.
Why visible?
Visible decline because we are seeing the economy stagnating. We are seeing massive inflation. We are seeing a crisis of leadership in the West. The only leadership was from the US. The other states are essentially satellite states, essentially of the US. And the US clearly has a crisis of leadership right now. There are all these issues in the West. The Chinese think it's their time to rise, but their economy is also stagnating. India's economy is rising very rapidly. Let's see how long that continues. I hope it does. So there are all these very interesting scenarios going on at various different parts of the globe. What's clear is that this is people have been saying it's the Asian century. Some people are saying it's the Chinese century. It could possibly be the Indian century, actually, the way things are going right now. So it's very interesting times we live in, and there could be military conflict. There are multiple flashpoints. There's always the India-Pakistan flashpoint. The India-China flashpoint is there. The entire border is undemarcated. We've had issues in the past. We've had clashes in the past. The Chinese obviously seek to constantly keep India on the back foot, destabilize India. There's a Taiwan issue. The Chinese want to get that island back. It is their stated objective. They want to do it as soon as possible. They are waiting for the right opportunity, and so many other issues. So yes, there are plenty of flashpoints, and any of those could spark off a war. Like what happened in World War I. One little thing happens and the entire continent is in turmoil.
So we've kind of let the pot simmer till the tension has reached the brim, and now we're just waiting for something to happen to spark off probably a worldwide conflict.
I think we don't want to see a worldwide conflict, but it's a possibility. Because see, once a spark is set off, you never know what's going to happen. Once you start a conflict, it can escalate to any level. Now, the trick for India is to not get involved in any conflict for the next 10-20 years.
Why?
Because our economy is growing really rapidly now. The past 2 years, because of the global issue, the pandemic, we had a downturn in the economy. The first quarter of 2022, India's economy grew at 13.6%, which is phenomenal. Now, that is something that may not be sustainable in the long run, but even if India's economy grows at 8% per year, by 27, we're going to be at $5 trillion, the GDP. By 2032 or 2033, we're going to be at $10 trillion. Once India reaches the $10 trillion mark, it's going to be unstoppable. Because as your economy grows, your hard power also grows correspondingly.
Which is your military
strength.
Force.
Correct,
Okay.
the military strength. Because if you have more money to invest in the military, you're going to get stronger. So as your GDP grows, your military also grows. Once India reaches the $10 trillion mark, nobody will essentially be willing to contemplate messing with India. So the trick for India is to reach that figure, the $10 trillion mark figure, without getting embroiled in any significant military conflict anywhere. It's going to be a tightrope walk, but let's see how that goes. I mean, there are other nations that do not want India to reach that stage. There are nations that do not want to see India reach even the $5 trillion mark. The Americans don't want that because they've already made a big mistake with China. They aided and abetted the rise of China back in the 1970s, 80s, 90s onwards, and now see what they created. They created a big monster which is now threatening their entire status as a superpower. They do not want to repeat that mistake with India. So they seek to use India as a counterweight to China, but they do not seek to see India rise too much. So they help India in certain ways, but they seek to destabilize and hamper India in other ways, and that's what we are witnessing right now. So that's the tightrope walk that India has to walk. India has plenty of enemies, plenty of adversaries in the subcontinent, in Asia, in the Western world. I mean, India essentially has no allies. India is going it alone, but India is capable of going it alone. So that is the tightrope walk that India has to do for the next 10, 15, maximum 20 years, and then we are out free.
So many tangents to go on. If anyone's tuning into one of these AC podcasts for the first time, I highly recommend you go check out all our past episodes that we've done in Hindi and English as well. This might be our 15th episode or so. And it's also a great entry point if you're just getting to learn about geopolitics for the first time in your life. Speaking about geopolitics from a very human level, a lot of my intro to geopolitics was through these podcasts. One thing I've realized is that the rules of geopolitics also apply to human situations, like when you're at a party, when you're in social situations, when you're in your office. Same rules apply about allies, about alliances, etc. The second thing I've learned is the factors that really contribute to geopolitical growth. So when we're talking about geopolitical growth, it's primarily, in reality, it's primarily about hard power, which is your military strength, and it's about your control on the oceans. Is there any third factor that you would put in this bracket?
It's about access to resources, raw materials, minerals, from iron ore,
From your own land?
from anywhere.
from anywhere.
Yes, and for that you need supply chains, you need logistics. So it's about controlling the supply chains, the sea routes, the land routes. You need access to energy, you want access to oil, you want access to bauxite, to coal, you want access to the rare earths that go into semiconductors and various other things. You need access to all the raw materials. You need to have a massive industrial base that can convert those raw materials into finished products. You need a massive military that can safeguard your access to all the shipping lanes and all the infrastructure and logistics that you built up. All this, it's all about control. The more geography you control, the more powerful you are and the more secure you are. And to do that, you need Navy, Air Force and Army and all that.
Is it fair to say that geopolitical power is your ability to go into a war and win it?
One of the factors is that as well, yes.
Okay.
Because in case one of your supply routes is it comes under anyone's control, or somebody threatens it, you need to be able to go and intervene and safeguard it. So you need to have the ability to project military power wherever your interests lie. So that is also a significant factor in geopolitics.
The third massive factor from a geopolitical perspective that I've understood is very simple. The richer you are, the more powerful you are.
Absolutely.
And actually, while we talk about power is just a means to get to the money. And when we're talking about USA's growth or China's growth, it's always been from a place of making money, building large-scale businesses, ideally in the world of manufacturing, being able to be self-sufficient, and then using all that money you've made to strengthen your army, to strengthen probably your mining capabilities, your trade capabilities. So actually, it's a race for the money.
It's a race for the money. Essentially it boils down to that. It's a race for money and for control. Power is control. Power is not influence, it's control.
Okay.
Yeah. We call ourselves influencers. I mean, people call us influencers. So it means that when we speak, people will listen to us. But we do not control those people. They do not obey us. Right? So power is about how much you control. If you control 10 people, they obey you instantaneously and without question. You have that much control. If there's 1,000 people, well-armed people who will obey you without question instantaneously, you are way more powerful. If you have 1.4 billion people who will obey you instantaneously, you are massively powerful. And it's all about control of people and control of resources and territory. So that's what power is. People believe that influence is power. Influence is not power. Influence is just that people will be willing to listen to you, but they may or may not take you seriously. Maybe you are funny, maybe you're entertaining, maybe you are witty, charming, whatever, but that is not power. Power is absolute control.
We get a lot of international viewers when it comes to AC podcasts, and keeping that in mind, I want to talk about Narendra Modi and the BJP. I thought we'll do this at the end of the episode. There's a lot of narratives that go out in the West about India being sort of a very skewed nation, that we're on the verge of dictatorship, that we're on the verge of self-destruction. I have a bunch of friends who are deeply inspired by left-wing ideologies. I have lots of friends who are deeply inspired by right-wing ideologies. I'd love to know your kind of relay of information to the West in terms of, if you had to introduce Narendra Modi from both a national standpoint and a geopolitical standpoint, what changes have you observed in the country? You're also someone who doesn't follow national politics, just like myself. But we do follow what the government is up to, especially from an international perspective. The truth of the matter is that you could debate a lot about what this Indian government could do better on a national level. No one at all can argue that there is a better international representative of India than this government, because this government knows how to show its teeth and they know how to make money. I'm saying these things because we just spoke about geopolitical power. Power is about money, power is about control. There are theories that say that maybe democracy isn't even the way to go. Maybe it's not the right way to run a nation. What do you have to say about this whole dictatorship angle? The fascism accusations? What do you have to say about Modi on an international level? And what do you have to say about this projection when we're talking about 2032, 2033 as an important phase? I think every single Indian, no matter what the political ideologies are, they know that this government is going to stay in power 10 years. Because what brings a government into national power in India are the votes of rural India. And I've often seen that most left-wing ideologies are only in urban centers in India. You go out in the interiors, you'll barely find anyone who's like out and out left-wing. At least the majority will vote for the current government. And they have a very different outlook on the current government. My point is, I've traveled all over India and I'm very, very sure that this government is going to stay in power until that 2032-33 mark, at least, if not beyond. So, Abhijit Chavda, sir, how would you like to introduce this government or talk about this government to international audiences?
So this current government came to power in 2014, and India had just gone through a decade of stagnation. The previous regime, the Congress regime, came to power in 2004 when Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee and his NDA coalition lost the election. And then there was a period of high growth because of the policies that the NDA had implemented, because typically in national economics, you see results a few years after you implement policies. So the first 5 years of the UPA rule was good. I mean, the nation did well. And then the economy took a downturn. It went into the doldrums, and there were all these scams and God knows what. So the nation was sick and tired of that. That's the mood that one sensed. And then Mr. Modi was projected as he was put as the next prime ministerial candidate, and he had a very strong track record of turning around the state of Gujarat from one of the backwaters of India into the most rapidly developing state in the country, essentially. And people voted for him. It was a popular vote, and he came to power with a big majority, or a decisive majority. He did not need the help of coalition partners to form the government, right? And clearly his policies were good in the first term, and that's why he was re-elected with an even bigger majority in the second term. So the policies that he has implemented have been very nation-centric, national interest oriented, and the foreign policy as well. So he has focused on the economy, he has focused on the military. It's taken time to get things going because it's a massive nation, 1.3 billion people, huge inertia. You want to implement policies, it's going to take several years for the results to start becoming visible.
How many years, realistically?
At least 5 years.
Okay.
At least 5 years. You implement a new policy, you put a new policy forth, you order the bureaucrats to start implementing it. They're going to take their own time. India's bureaucracy is a legacy of the colonial era. It's not the most agile bureaucracy in the world, and so on. So there are all these issues, and now we are seeing the results of that. You also had the coronavirus down, the entire recession because of that. 2 years, we lost 2 years, but now the economy is doing well. So overall, if you look at Mr. Modi, he is an extremely popular leader. India is a vibrant democracy. People make these accusations of fascism against the BJP and Mr. Modi. When you talk about fascism, you talk about Mussolini, we talk about people like Hitler, right? They put people in concentration camps. They massacred lots of people. How many people have been massacred in India or put in concentration camps? Zero. Right, so that accusation is just to tarnish the image and paint somebody with a certain kind of brush. Mr. Modi is clearly an extremely popular leader, and when you talk about democracy, the people say that India is teetering on the brink of dictatorship. India is the most vibrant democracy in the world. Let's compare India with the United States. The United States is a two-party nation. It's a two-party state. It is just one step ahead of communist China, which is the one-party state. It's just one step ahead of North Korea, which is the one-party state. The US only has two political parties. Who's going to represent the Native Americans? Who's going to represent the Hispanics? Who's going to represent the African Americans? Who's going to represent the various minorities that are marginalized in the US? In India, we have political parties that represent every single faction of society. In the US, everything is force-fitted into this two-party framework. It is artificial. I do not consider this to be democracy. If you want to consider any nation undemocratic or dictatorial, it's actually the US, not India. India is a very vibrant democracy. Yes, it's chaotic. Yes, there are issues, but it's a far better democracy. It's far better representative of the people in their aspirations, especially all the small minorities, than anything the Americans can show us. So these accusations of India teetering on the brink of dictatorship, they are risible, laughable, ridiculous, right? So that's the thing. Now, which system is good? Is dictatorship good? Is democracy good? Well, I would say that any system is good as long as it produces results, right? As long as it serves the people and serves the nation in the long term. Any system is good. For the longest time in the world, we had monarchies, we had emperors, queens, kings, emperors, and they did a good job. It's only in the past 70, 80, 100 years that we've been experimenting with democracy, and we still have to see how far that experiment succeeds. India is the birthplace of democracy. We had the Mahajanapadas, these self-governing people's republics that go back to the Mahabharata era, which is several thousand years before today. democracy wasn't born in Greece. Democracy was born in India. We had our own form of democracy, which would have elected kings or queens, and they could be deposed if they did not perform. Right? So we don't need to be lectured about democracy. We don't need anyone to teach us what democracy is. Now, is democracy the right thing for India? I think we are a democratic nation. It's in our DNA, right? But maybe this form of democracy may not be the ideal form of democracy. Maybe in the future we will tweak things and embrace a different form of democracy, but it will still be democracy. Now, in the 21st centuries, the nations that will rule the world are the nations that will implement policies and adjust to the changing environment rapidly. The ones that react the fastest and implement policies the fastest in the shortest time, these are the nations that will rule the world.
Can you give an example of the situation? Like what kind of policy will have to be implemented because of something happening on an international scale?
Right. Let's say there's a global recession and your economy is suffering because of that. Now, let's say you have to change policies. Maybe you need to change the way your banking system works, or maybe you need to change the way the interest rates are, or any economic change. If you take several months to implement a certain change, it may be too late to save your economy. But if you can do it immediately with one order and it's done tomorrow, that's gonna turn the ship around very fast.
Is Modi the most powerful prime minister our country has seen
Possibly.
in history?
Maybe not the most powerful, because today's geopolitical scenario is that there is a lot of interference within India from external sources. What happened in the early 1990s, the 1992, I think the economic liberalization, it came with a whole bunch of caveats.
मतलब अमेरिका है, मतलब अमेरिका यही चाहता है कि वो जो है वो सब मतलब पूरी दुनिया को अपने कंट्रोल में करे, जो कि उन्होंने किया हुआ था। एक वक्त था जब अमेरिका ने सबको कंट्रोल में किया हुआ था अपनी पावर में, और जो वो बोलते थे वही हो जाता था।
यूएसए ने बड़ा सीन खराब किया है और इसमें से निकलना है अब, और वो निकलना इसी तरह है कि इंडिया इस वक्त टेक ऑफ मोड में है, जो उन्होंने बताया है। ठीक है, चाइना इस वक्त ओल्ड एज उसकी बूढ़ा हो रहा है, वो उसकी इकोनॉमी बूढ़ी हो रही है, लोग उनके कर करके काम अब वो बुढ़ापे की तरफ जा रहे हैं।
इनिशियली अमेरिका ने चाइना को सपोर्ट किया, एक बहुत बड़ी हम कहेंगे कि
जायंट बना दिया
बनाने में, हाँ, कि जिस तरीके से पूरी दुनिया उस पर डिपेंड करना शुरू हुआ, और फिर उसके बाद चाइना जो है उसने ही अमेरिका को हम कहें कि एक आंखें दिखाना शुरू कर दी।